describe the weapon? Yes. It's a high point.
Frank Atwood addressed the clemency board today, still proclaiming he didn't do it.
You all right?
You all right, ma'am? You all right, ma'am?
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this is going to complete your jury service. I'm going to meet you in the jury room.
We'll have only two choices, either life in prison or death by injection.
Keep everybody back!
The young girl, she still asks for her mother. Mommy, I love you, Mommy.
Uh-oh, we're getting serious.
But it shoots 9mm slugs. If you was to see this weapon, you would not believe it.
By having him sit to death row for something he did not do.
I cannot wait for the day when I see him laying on that table, waiting to get the injection.
Unveiling the chilling final moments of corrupt cops, their haunting last words before facing retribution. Explore the darkness and unravel the gripping tales in this riveting account of justice served. Number 15. Amelia Carr. In Ocala, Florida, at the Lowell Correctional Institution, the chilling tale of two young women unfolds. Tiffany Cole, now 33, and Amelia Carr, now 32, crossed paths on the infamous Life Row, a corridor where Demise Row inmates live their lives until ending. Both women had led seemingly ordinary lives, with Tiffany excelling in high school activities and Amelia being academically inclined. However, their paths took a dark turn as they found themselves entangled with the wrong individuals. Tiffany was involved in a gruesome crime, robbing and burying alive neighbors of her family. She claimed she had no idea what was coming, but the jury found her guilty. Amelia, on the other hand, was convicted of assisting her boyfriend in slaying his wife. She maintained her innocence regarding the actual slaying, but was condemned to demise. The women both endured difficult pasts, suffering physical misuse during their childhoods. Their attorneys argued about the impact of trauma on their actions. Despite their current circumstances, they expressed newfound peace and hope. The women questioned the justice system, highlighting the disparities between the wealthy and underprivileged when it comes to legal representation. Though both women appealed their sentences and avoided discussing the specific details of their crimes, they pondered the media's obsession with portraying women in a negative light. They found solace in books, prayers, and their faith while serving time, emphasizing the importance of forgiveness and hope. Number 14. Len Davis. Len Davis, a former New Orleans police officer known as quote-unquote RoboCop for his aggressive policing style, was convicted of conspiring to slaying a local resident, Kim Groves. After Groves filed a complaint against Davis for beating a young man, he conspired with a local drug dealer to have her slayed. Davis was convicted on federal civil rights charges and sentenced to demise in 1996. Although his demise sentence was initially overturned, a subsequent jury reaffirmed it in 2005. Davis is currently on federal demise row. In recent years, 3 men wrongfully convicted of slaying based on false testimony from Davis were released from prison. Number 13. Taylor Parker. In the case of Taylor Parker, a convicted slayer, the most disturbing last words were those of Reagan Hancock's mother after the jury sentenced Parker to demise for the slaying of Reagan Hancock and her unborn child. Emotions ran high in the courtroom as family members broke down in tears upon hearing the verdict. During the 2-month trial, prosecutors presented mountains of evidence and over 140 witnesses testified, emphasizing the heinousness of the crime. The defense attorney attempted to paint Parker as flawed and failed by her family, but it did not sway the jury. Within just 90 minutes, the jury sentenced Parker to demise, convinced that she posed a future danger and deserved the harshest punishment. The reaction of the victims' families have further highlighted the disturbing nature of the case. As Parker cried on the stand, Reagan Hancock's mother, sister, and husband gave witness statements expressing their grief and pain. The immediate removal of Parker from the courtroom and her transfer to Demise Row reinforced the gravity of her actions. Number 12. Nico Jenkins. Nico Jenkins, a spree assassin convicted of committing 4 slayings in Nebraska in 2013, left chilling last words before his ending. Jenkins was part of a violent family lineage with a history of crime and violence. Despite being diagnosed with mental illness, he carried out heinous acts under the influence of a deity from ancient Egyptian religion, Apophis. In his 8-hour confession, Jenkins claimed his victims were sacrifices to Apophis, and he expressed no remorse for his actions.
It was for hearsay, not hearsay, but to say. So this was them, my little cousins, the one that were in the house with me. That when I got this is the real deal right here, which you people signed up for.
Okay. Before we get any further, though, I need to read you this right.
Describe the weapon, yes. It's a high point, but it shoots 9mm slugs. And if you was to see this weapon, you would not believe it. Like I said, I didn't know who was coming, what was coming, who was it going to be used on. You realize that, right? So if you're coming from that crime scene, you can hit it.
You all right?
You all right, man? You all right, man?
He was found guilty and sentenced to demise by lethal injection. Jenkins' obsession with violence and lack of empathy towards his victims disturbed all involved in the case. Even after his conviction, Jenkins continued to exhibit erratic behavior and claimed to be under the command of Apophis. He filed a lawsuit against the state for releasing him wrongfully from prison and exhibited signs of mental instability during his trial. His last words at his ending did not show any remorse for the lives he took. The Jenkins' family criminal history and Nico's disturbing last words shed light on the far-reaching generational violence and criminal behavior. Despite his troubled upbringing and mental health issues, Jenkins' actions demonstrated a lack of humanity and disregard for human life. The case of Nico Jenkins serves as a chilling reminder of the dangers of unaddressed mental health issues and the devastating impact of violent family legacies. His disturbed last words before ending reflect the horrifying nature of his crimes and the lack of remorse he showed for his victims. Number 11. Dobie Gillis Williams. The case of Dobie Gillis Williams, an American criminal from Louisiana, involved disturbing last words before his ending. Williams was convicted of the slaying of Sonia Nippers in 1984 and sentenced to demise. The case has been controversial due to issues surrounding his confession, trial, and appeals. Williams was on a furlough from prison when the slaying occurred, and the police picked him up for questioning due to his criminal record. The trial was moved to a different district, and an all-white jury was seated, raising concerns about due process and racial bias. Police officers testified that Williams confessed, but there was no recording of the confession. The evidence presented during the trial was circumstantial, and newer forensic tests have since been called some of it into question. Throughout the appeals process, there were issues with DNA analysis and the accuracy of forensic evidence. Despite a federal court judge overturning Williams' sentence, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals upheld it, leading to his ending. On January 8, 1999, Williams was executed by lethal injection. In his final statement, he expressed no hard feelings towards anyone and blessed everyone. The case of Dobie Gillis Williams highlights the complexity and flaws in the criminal justice system, particularly concerning ending penalty cases. The lack of a recorded confession and concerns about forensic evidence accuracy raised troubling questions about the fairness of the trial and subsequent appeals. Number 10. Frank Atwood. The case of Frank Atwood, who was convicted for the slaying of Vicki Lynn Hoskinson, involved disturbing last words before his ending. Atwood maintained his innocence even on his final day, proclaiming that he didn't commit the crime. Despite claims of transformation and finding God during his decades on Demise Row, the Clemency Board denied his request for commutation, pardon, or reprieve. Atwood's attorneys argued that he had changed over the years, becoming an Orthodox Christian, earning a degree, authoring books, and getting married. They claimed that the evidence against him was circumstantial, pointing out that no conclusive evidence linked him to the crime scene. They questioned the presence of any physical evidence, such as hair or fingerprints, that would definitely implicate him. The victim, 8-year-old Vicki Lynn Hoskinson, went missing in 1984, and her partial remains were discovered months later. Witnesses placed Atwood, a convicted child molester, on parole at the time in the Tucson neighborhood where the crime occurred. Despite his pleas of innocence, the family of Vicki Lynn Hoskinson expressed their pain and sought justice for her demise.
Frank Atwood addressed the Clemency Board today, still proclaiming he didn't do it. This despite several hours of testimony. 4 decades he's been on death row.
This crime occurred in 1984. that sat before the court in 1984.
By having him sent to death row for something he did not do.
There were some prints left on the bike that never matched Frank Atwood. None of his prints were found on the bike. Certainly, what happened?
I can always say that while I know you will never believe that I did not take her from you.
The Clemency Board unanimously denied Atwood's request for clemency, and he has a scheduled ending date by lethal injection. With pending motions in the Arizona Supreme Court and federal court, his fate remains uncertain until further legal proceedings. The case highlights the complex and emotionally charged nature of capital punishment cases, where innocent lives and possible miscarriages of justice are at stake. It also sheds light on the enduring impact of heinous crimes on victims' families, who seek closure and justice even decades after the tragic events. The final moments before ending serve as a reminder of the gravity of the legal system's decisions and the complexities surrounding the ending penalty. Number 9. Thomas Knight. Thomas Knight, also known as the Bay Harbor Island Slayer, was a convicted slayer who spent over 4 decades in Florida's criminal justice system, repeatedly delaying his ending for the brutal 1974 slayings of a couple. Despite breaking out of jail, slaying a prison guard, and causing disruptions during court hearings, Knight's appeals eventually ran out, leading to his ending. On the day of his ending, Knight refused to make any statement or apologize to the families of his victims. Knight was injected with a lethal cocktail of drugs at the Florida State Prison at 6:31 p.m. He had been sentenced to demise for the fatal stabbing of a corrections officer in 1980, and he was also convicted of the brutal slayings of Sidney and Lillian Gans in 1974, whom he kidnapped and shot to demise in South Miami-Dade. The families of the victims, along with former co-workers of the slain officer, watched the ending, and some expressed a sense of closure and peace after witnessing the culmination of the decades-long legal process. Throughout his years in the criminal justice system, Knight's case faced numerous delays and legal battles, with one federal court criticizing the inefficiency and gridlock of ending penalty litigation. Despite the lengthy process, Knight's ending was ultimately carried out, ending his 40-year journey on Demise Row. Knight's crimes were particularly heinous. He kidnapped Sidney and Lillian Gans at rifle point, forced them to withdraw money from a bank, and later shot them both in a remote wooded area. He was found guilty of the Gans' slayings in 1975 and was sent to Demise Row. While in prison, he fatally knifed a corrections officer, adding another slaying to his already violent record. Knight's ending was the result of numerous legal proceedings, reversals, and reinstatements of his demise sentence, making it a complex and contentious case within the criminal justice system. Ultimately, Knight's refusal to provide any last words or show remorse before his ending added to the disturbing nature of his crimes and the long-lasting impact they had on the victims' families and the community. Number 7. Dexter Johnson. Dexter Johnson's case is a harrowing example of a disturbing crime that led to his demise sentence. At the age of 18, Johnson and 4 other teenagers embarked on a violent crime spree that culminated in the double slaying of Maria Aparice and Hugh Newell in Harris County in 2007. They carjacked and robbed the young couple before taking them to a secluded area, where Johnson physically misconducted Aparice before he and another teen shot them both, ending their lives. Johnson's trial resulted in a demise sentence after it was revealed that the slayings were part of a 25-day crime spree, during which 5 people were slain in robberies.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this is going to complete your jury service. I'm going to meet you in the jury room.
However, as his ending date approached, his long-appointed attorney argued that Johnson was intellectually disabled and, therefore, ineligible for the ending penalty. This claim was based on a 2017 U.S. Supreme Court ruling that invalidated Texas's previous method of determining intellectual disabilities for ending penalty eligibility. In a recent appeal, a new evaluation suggested that Johnson had an IQ of 70, which is generally considered intellectually disabled. However, prosecutors cited earlier tests conducted before his trial that yielded higher IQ scores as grounds for rejecting the appeal. Despite these conflicting arguments, a federal court intervened and halted Johnson's ending because he had recently been assigned a new attorney who needed time to thoroughly investigate the case and his former attorney's potential shortcomings.
That's her daughter.
Guilty of capital murder. In accordance with the laws of the state of Texas, this court hereby assesses your punishment of death.
The new attorney, Jeremy Sheppers, discovered significant evidence suggesting that Johnson's previous lawyer, Pat McCann, was ineffective and that there were unresolved issues surrounding Johnson's intellectual disability claim. Sheppers' filing indicated that more time was necessary to review the case properly. The stay of ending granted by the federal court is temporary and lasts for 90 days from the appointment of the new attorney. After this period, the county may request a new ending date, but it must be set at least 90 days in the future. Despite the delay, Harris County prosecutors maintain their stance that Johnson's demise sentence will ultimately be carried out, and they anticipate a new ending date being set shortly. Number 3. Howard Paul Guidry. The case of Howard Paul Guidry, one of the accomplices in the slaying for hire plot orchestrated by Robert Frada, sheds light on the most disturbing last words of corrupt cops before ending. Although Guidry has not yet been given an ending date, his involvement in the heinous crime has brought attention to the rare occurrence of accomplices facing the ending penalty. Robert Frada, a former police officer, hired hitmen, including Howard Guidry and Joseph Price Dash, to slaying his wife Farah in 1994. The involvement of Guidry and Price Dash came to light through 911 tapes, which indicated that others were involved in the crime. Guidry was arrested after an unrelated bank robbery, and investigators found the gun believed to have been used in the slaying inside his car. Joseph Price Dash, another accomplice, was arrested as he was driving the getaway car. Investigators believe that Price Dash played a significant role in convincing Guidry to carry out the hit in exchange for $1,000 found in Frada's car. Accomplices receiving the ending penalty for their involvement in solicitation of a capital slaying case is exceedingly rare. During the 1990s, Harris County, where the crime occurred, executed more inmates than any other state in the country. At that time, life without parole was not a sentencing option, and public knowledge about Demise Row was limited. The transparency of the process has improved over the years, but cases like Frada's continue to highlight the heinousness of certain crimes. Despite appeals and awaiting on ending dates, Howard Guidry and Joseph Price Dash remain on Demise Row. The case of Robert Frada and his accomplices serve as a reminder of the consequences that corrupt cops can face when involved in such grave criminal activities. As the legal process continues, the families of the victims and the community seek justice for the crimes committed almost 3 decades ago. Number 2. Robert Frada. The case of Robert Frada, a former police officer, is a chilling example of a corrupt cop's disturbing last words before ending. Almost 30 years ago, Frada was convicted of hiring 2 men to slaying his estranged wife, who was also the mother of his 3 children. Despite his denial and self-serving claims, the evidence against him was overwhelming. Frada's wife, Sherry, was ambushed and shot in her garage, leading investigators to suspect her estranged husband's involvement. During questioning, Frada displayed a classic narcissistic and self-centered demeanor, trying to deflect blame and insisting on his innocence. However, detectives uncovered a contentious divorce and custody battle, along with a suspicious $1,000 found in his car on the night of the slaying. For months after Sherry's slaying, her children, Bradley and Daniel, were left in confusion and pain, wondering when they could live with their father again. Witness testimonies during the trial revealed Frada's conversations about finding someone to kill his wife, and recorded jail phone calls further incriminated him. In 1996, Frada was convicted and sentenced to demise, but a retrial was granted more than a decade later due to inadmissible confessions from the accomplices. However, the retrial ended with the same verdict, and Frada was again sentenced to demise. Throughout the years, victims' rights advocate Andy Kahn remained close to the family, supporting them during the difficult trials. He promised Sherry's father that he would witness Frada's ending as a tribute to the victims.
Justice has prevailed. Freedom has prevailed. The young girl, she still asks for her mother. Mommy, I love you, Mommy. Heaven, now that's a lot of torture. That's a hell of a lot of torture.
I cannot wait for the day when I see him laying on that table, waiting to get the injection.
We'll have only two choices, either life in prison or death by injection.
Robert Frada's case stands as a haunting reminder of the dark side of law enforcement and the consequences of a corrupt cop's actions. His refusal to take responsibility and the pain he inflicted on his family make his impending ending a haunting conclusion to this disturbing story of slaying for hire. Number 1. Edmund Emil Kemper. Edmund Emil Kemper III, also known as the Co-Ed Slayer, is one of America's most infamous serial slayers. Born in December 1948, Kemper's criminal history began at a young age when he slayed his grandparents at the age of 15. After spending time in a psychiatric hospital, he was released and appeared to be rehabilitated. However, lurking beneath his seemingly normal exterior was a deep-seated rage and disturbing fantasies that would soon manifest in a series of gruesome slayings. Between May 1972 and April 1973, Kemper went on a slaying spree targeting young college girls who were hitchhiking. He would pick them up, engage in casual conversation, and then brutally slaying them. Kemper's slayings were driven by a complex mix of rage, frustration, and erotic inadequacy.
Uh-oh, we're getting serious. Excuse me. This month is 18 years for murder.
What was your sentence?
That's the opposite of consecutive.
Yeah.
Consecutive would be one at a time, and of course you can't serve multiple life sentences, but it's me to one term of 7 to life, which at that time was the maximum.
In considering your crimes and crimes done by other serial killers?
So it would, any answer I would give that would be other than the death penalty would sound very, who on the surface don't have any redeeming qualities whatsoever. They don't do anything or say anything.
He admitted to feeling impotent emotionally and sought power and control over his victims as a way to cope with his insecurities. During his slaying spree, Kemper slayed his mother, Clarnell Strandberg, and her best friend, Sally Hallett. Both of them had belittled him throughout his life. In a shocking act of violence, he decapitated his mother's corpse and violated her head before disposing of it. Kemper's chilling actions demonstrated a disturbing level of brutality and a complete lack of remorse. Despite his violent tendencies, Kemper was able to maintain a facade of normalcy in his day-to-day life. He was known for his intelligence and articulate manner, which allowed him to blend in with society and even make friends with police officers. This deceptive charm played a crucial role in his ability to continue his slaying spree undetected.
Well, I'm not an expert. I'm not an authority. I'm someone
like you were doing.
It would be a guess, but it's not. It's far more than 35. It isn't that impossible. She didn't give up. I did. I came in out of the cold.
Did you like Kemper?
I like Kemper.
You were able to appear like a...
Living a parallel and increasingly sick life, other life. What in the hell am I doing telling you that? Am I a masochist? Am I looking to how commanding these rages got? I was raging inside. There was just, that would trigger one or the other. And outside, not very sane. But again.
You were involved in the campus because your mother worked there.
Yes.
Kemper's twisted rationalizations and matter-of-fact explanations of his crimes during interviews are chilling and provide insight into the mind of a remorseless slayer. He admitted to having slayed more than 35 people, and his lack of empathy for his victims is deeply disturbing. Even after being arrested and facing a potential life sentence, Kemper displayed no genuine remorse for his heinous acts. In February 1973, Kemper was finally apprehended and convicted of 8 counts of first-degree slaying. He was sentenced to life in prison, where he remains to this day. His case stands as a grim reminder of the potential for evil that lurks within some individuals and serves as a cautionary tale for the horrors that can result from a deeply disturbed and violent mind. And that's all for this video, folks. We'll see you next time at the next one.